Good evening, and thank you guys for joining us tonight. My name is Kimberly Butler-Willis, and I'm the Director of Community Health at Roper St. Francis Healthcare. Now, COVID-19 has impacted our lives in ways we would have never imagined before March 2020. But as your healthcare neighbor, we are committed to keeping you, and that's our teammates, their families, and the greater community, safe and informed. We've brought together a panel of our COVID-19 experts prepared to answer your tough questions and to dispel those myths and rumors that we've heard around town. So for the next 30 minutes, I'll ask our panel questions submitted by teammates and by the community, and we'll do our best to weave in your live questions. So use the chat feature right there in YouTube, but then you can also email us questions at vaccine@rsfh.com, and we'll make sure to get those in so that you can get the answers that you need to make the best healthcare decisions for you and your family. Frequently asked questions will also be available on our website soon after this forum, so stay on the lookout. Now before we get started, I'm going to introduce our panel. We have Sherelle Smith, who's our Director of Nursing Services at Roper St. Francis Healthcare. We have Dr. Lloyd Hepburn, who's an internist with Roper St. Francis at Eagles Landing Primary Care and also a member of our board at Bon Secours St. Francis Hospital. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Bob Oliverio. He's the Vice President and Chief Medical Officer of Ambulatory Care and Population Health at the hospital. And before we get started in our questions, I'm going to ask our panelists to give us their own vaccine experience. Tell me why you did it and how it felt.
Okay, I'll start. I actually chose to receive the vaccine personally because working in healthcare obviously puts me at a greater risk for developing COVID, but also from a family perspective, I wanted to have an opportunity to protect my family. I also did not want to become a patient in a hospital. I did not want to be on a ventilator. And, sadly enough, I didn't want to get to a point that I could get so sick that I could potentially die in a hospital and potentially dying alone. So for those reasons, I wanted to take advantage of any opportunity that I had to reduce the likelihood of those things happening. As far as my experience with the vaccine, I am fortunate and able to say that I did not have any side effects besides a sore arm. So soreness that obviously was very temporary, very much worth the benefits that come with the vaccine, and that was it.
Yeah, as a physician, I obviously am at risk of acquiring COVID, so I wanted the vaccine for that reason. And also, I had a brush with COVID earlier last summer where I tested positive and had to isolate and was quarantined from the family for 10 days and the whole rigmarole. As it turned out, it was a false positive test, but as scary as that was, I just couldn't wait to get the vaccine, and it's such a great vaccine. I got the second one last week and the first one 3 weeks prior to that. And I had a little soreness in my left arm, and I thought maybe I felt a little tired, but I wasn't certain. And if you got to think about whether you're tired, you're okay. So I think it turned out quite well.
Yeah, and on my end, basically, it was as somebody who's concerned about population health, this is the necessary step for moving back to normalcy. So I got to participate in a trial and was very happy to do so. And I figured I got the vaccine when I got the shot because I did get a little bit of a fever. I was achy and pretty beat up for about 6 hours. But Tylenol and fluids just took care of it, and so no problem. But it's something that we all have to do in order to get back to some semblance of normal.
So you guys mentioned these side effects, and that's a common question from our community. Tell me, outside of the soreness of the arm or the fatigue that you guys mentioned, what are some other things that patients should look out for?
Well, people tend to get a fever with the vaccine. They can. It's usually responds very well to Tylenol. They get muscle aches, joint aches. They often get a headache. Some people say they get nasal congestion. Those are some of the more common symptom that you get with the vaccine. Typically, it lasts a day or two, responds well to antipyretics, drugs for fevers, and it's not a problem.
Okay. Now, are those side effects common with both vaccines? I know at Roper St. Francis right now, we're issuing the Pfizer vaccine. So tell me, is there a difference between Pfizer and Moderna?
I would say not really. I mean, the side effects are pretty much similar for both vaccines, and you can expect, by and large, a sore arm, most likely. Sometimes you do get, like Dr. Hepburn said, fever, chills, headache, less likely. But they're about the same, they work the same, and they probably will affect you the same.
Yeah. Dr. Hepburn, you mentioned that you had a brush with COVID before. Now, if I'm COVID positive, should I still receive the vaccine?
We think if you acquire COVID, you probably have good antibody levels for at least 3 months. That gives you great protection. And after that, we're just not certain. So we recommend that folks wait 90 days, 3 months, after they've had COVID before getting the vaccine, not before.
Dr. Oliverio, I'm going to pitch this one to you. Maria just emailed in. Well, we know should we check our antibody levels a year after the vaccination? Is that required?
No, right now we don't know when we should check antibody levels and if that's actually going to be a reasonable test. Right now, CDC is recommending, before you get vaccinated, there's no reason to get antibody levels. So if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated.
What if I have a high risk for allergies? I'm prone to allergic reactions. Is this vaccine still safe for me?
When we talk about allergies related to any vaccination, we're not referring to, first of all, to seasonal allergies and rhinitis that people get where they're sensitive to pollen and so forth. We're talking about serious anaphylactic reactions where you get swelling of the lip, the mouth, the tongue, shortness of breath, low blood pressure, and you have to go to the hospital. So if you have if you've been prescribed an epinephrine pen, then you have had serious allergic reactions and ought to have some talk with your physician prior to taking the vaccine.
So Sherelle, if I'm not talking to my physician and I came to Roper St. Francis to get this vaccine, but I'm not feeling well, who should I contact?
We actually do ask that you reach out to your provider. We do recommend that you have your provider kind of assess whether you should get the vaccine and when is the best time for you to get the vaccine.
When am I fully vaccinated? I've had both doses. I'm ready to hit the town. Am I safe?
So even with the vaccine actually reduces the likelihood that you will become severely ill from COVID. So we do want to encourage social distancing, continue to wear your mask. It is not the time to hit the town, but it is the time to keep you safe and keep you out of the hospital, which is our goal.
Yeah. How long will this vaccine last? Dr. Oliverio, should I be prepared to see you annually for this shot?
That's a good question. I can't answer that right now. Right now, we know that about 2 weeks after you get your second dose, you'll probably see the peak of your antibodies. That's about when you're the peak of immune. Now, that may wane over time. We're not sure if this is going to be like a flu shot where you have to do this, say, every year. We're going to be finding more about that as time goes on.
What if I had a reaction? Bruce actually just emailed into YouTube or sent a message in from YouTube. I got the vaccine, but I'm interested in the vaccine, but I had an allergic reaction to the flu vaccine. Should I be cautious?
You should be cautious, but they are two very different vaccines. Remember, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are mRNA vaccines. With the flu, you get an inactivated whole virus. So there are two very different vaccines. But if you've had one reaction with one vaccine, you should have some caution. A personal note, I have a family member who had a reaction to the flu vaccine, and she was very reluctant to have get the COVID vaccine. I had to I had to do some serious arguing before she agreed to it, and it went perfectly fine for her.
Well, one of the things I would say is, yes, the most likely people who are going to have reactions to the vaccine are folks who have had serious allergic reactions before, but we ask those questions before you get the vaccine. So we'll know that information, and we have staff on site who are, who are adept at handling those kind of issues. And normally, the stuff that's in the current vaccines different than what's in the flu shot. So shouldn't be a lot of cross-reactivity.
And we must add that, these are questions we ask with all vaccines. It's not unique to the COVID vaccine. I have to stress that the COVID vaccine is as safe as any vaccine we've ever created, at least as safe.
Terry just emailed in, I was never able to develop antibodies to the mumps. Should I be concerned that I might have the same problem with this vaccine? How could I even find out?
That is a good question. We don't recommend folks get antibody levels after the COVID vaccine ordinarily. But if you have some sort of immune deficiency where you've had difficulty achieving adequate antibody levels after previous vaccines, then you might want to talk to your doctor about checking your antibody levels after you've had the COVID vaccine, but it's not something we recommend ordinarily.
We don't know what to do with that information. So is there a booster that's necessary? We're just not sure yet. So you get the antibodies, you don't know what to do with those results. So I would hold off on that, like Dr. Hepburn said.
You guys kind of touched on that immunocompromised patient. What if I'm a patient living with HIV or even cancer? Should I be cautious?
Of course you should. If cancer, just by virtue of being itself, is an immunosuppressed state, and the treatment of cancer oftentimes makes you immunosuppressed. Obviously, HIV is all about immunosuppression. The good news that, I've had several patients with HIV who've had COVID, and they've all done fine, and it looks like they do fairly well when infected with the COVID vaccine. And it looks like people who've had cancer in the past, who've been treated and have finished with their cancer, are not necessarily at increased risk of getting sicker, but those who are being actively treated clearly are.
And those populations should get vaccine.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Sherelle, I'm going to ask you this because I know that you've been responsible for the logistics of our vaccine dissemination. Tell me, how are you keeping track of all of that? How do you know which vaccine I received and when I need to come back for that second dose?
So the way our process has worked in the hospital is not only do you receive a vaccine administration card, so you're able to track your doses along with the type of vaccine, even specifically down to the lot number to that vaccine. We also have a database that we're having to enter that information in. So this information is shared with every state, so we're able to post statistics, but it's also information that tells us the same information, what dose, what vaccine you got, the dose is all the same. And then also even specifically as far as the lot number. So we do have a tracking system, and that is all loaded in a database.
What about my rural folks? We don't have stable internet all the time. How can I get this information without having to log into another portal?
Go.
Yeah, we have a couple of ways to sort of get in touch with folks who can help you schedule vaccination. So there's an email address, which is CV19 vaxreg at rsfh.com, and there's also a number that you can call, which is 727-DOCS, 843-727-DOCS, D-O-C-S, and we'll actually help you get scheduled for a vaccine. One of the things that we do on the ambulatory side is if you schedule your first dose, you will schedule your second dose at that time. We don't want you to schedule your first dose if you're unwilling to schedule your second dose.
Okay. Now, I heard that older people are more prevalent to side effects. Is that true? The older I get, the sicker I'll be from the vaccine?
Not actually. I mean, that's...
Never heard of that.
No, I mean, well, usually, younger people mount more of an immune response. So, you know, one of the things about the vaccine is if you have symptoms or side effects, that's actually your body showing that you're getting immune to it. As you get older, your immune system tends to decrease over time, so you may not mount that kind of an immune response to the vaccine. So sometimes we actually see decreased levels of symptoms in those folks who are older.
But the data certainly shows efficacy throughout all the age groups
Absolutely.
who participated in the trials.
Dr. Hepburn, can you explain what efficacy means just to make sure we stay on the same page?
It simply means that it works.
All right. So in the same line, you guys are talking about those immunocompromised patients. Cynthia just emailed in. She wants to know if it's safe to take this vaccine even going through chemo.
Again, that's probably not a population we've studied. One of the things I would say is there's probably not a reason not to take it. The big question is, will it be as efficacious for those folks who are under chemo as it would be for those who are not under chemo? The thing about the COVID vaccine is it does not give you COVID. It can't give you COVID. So it's really all about your body's ability to mount an immune response. So if there's any potential of, say, waiting for a little bit and after chemotherapy to get the vaccine, that's a possibility. But honestly, right now, populations at risk, we just want you to get the shot.
Yeah, that's certainly a discussion you want to have with your oncologist.
Yes.
Because most chemotherapeutic agents do suppress the immune system. Does that translate into decreased antibody response? We don't know.
We don't know.
So you have to discuss that with your oncologist and perhaps wait a little, perhaps, but we simply don't know.
Yeah. What about, Maria wants to know if a patient is on steroids, does that enhance the vaccine? Does that help her out a bit?
Not really. Short answer.
Again,
Point blank.
yeah, it decreases the immune response. So anything that decreases the immune response may decrease your body's ability to mount an antibody response to the vaccine. So there are a lot of things that can meddle with it. The one thing I will say is, it's good to get the vaccine. I'd rather have you vaccinated than not vaccinated.
Yeah. Let's switch over to our Black and brown folks. We know that medical mistrust is real, and it's valid for a long history of reasons. So tell me, how many African Americans were considered in these clinical trials?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. There is a lot of skepticism in the African American community and other minority communities regarding the COVID vaccine. And like you said, that relates to abuses that were heaped on those populations in the past, for which there's a group memory. But I just want to state that those abuses that's in the past. They're not occurring currently. And the lapses currently are more lapses of omission rather than lapses of commission. And what you don't want to do is to omit from taking this virus when it is the safest, most effective virus we've ever created. From taking the vaccine when it's the safest and most effective vaccine we've ever created. And if you think about it, the African American community has been more affected than any other group. So for the group that's most being most ravaged by the virus to actually not want to take this life-saving vaccine would be truly, truly tragic. And the vaccine really does work. I mean, we've heard people say it's 95% effective. I think that figure is quite a bit understated, because if you look at the other 5% who got COVID, if you look at the clinical trials, 95% of people who got the vaccine didn't get COVID, and 5% got COVID. If you look at the 5% that got the vaccine and still got COVID, they all had very, very mild COVID. In fact, if you combine the figures from the Moderna and the Pfizer studies, the folks who got the vaccine were about 32,000 people combined. Of those 32,000 people, do you know how many got severe COVID? One. So one person out of 32,000 people that got the vaccine got severe COVID. If you do the math, that means this vaccine is 99.999% effective at preventing severe COVID. And I don't see how one can look at their loved ones and say, oh, I'm not going to take this vaccine that's 100% effective from keeping me out of the ICU. That would seem to be near lunacy, and it's something we're trying to honestly educate folks about and try to impress on them how effective the vaccine is and how safe it is.
Dr. Hepburn, I think that's the most I've heard about African Americans in the clinical trials. So thank you so much.
Oh, and the answer is, I'm sorry, it was 10% of those people in the study were African Americans, which is just about, the percentage of African Americans in the US is about 11%. So it correlates. So enough African Americans were there, and they did identical to the other populations in the trials.
That's great to know. Outside of my Black and brown folks, we also have a large pool of uninsured people here in the Low Country. So tell me, if I don't have insurance, do I still have access to this vaccine, or do I have to pay?
Absolutely have access to the vaccine. The one thing we do not want to do is produce barriers to vaccination and have people not be able to get vaccinated because they don't have insurance or money to pay for it. So there's no out-of-pocket expense to patients. If you do have insurance, there may be an administration fee that's charged to your insurance, but if they don't pay that, it's not going to go to the patient. So zero out-of-pocket for any patient.
What about my residency status? It may not be as clear, and I don't have an ID. Can I still get this vaccine?
Yes, as far as I know, anyone can go and get the vaccine. If you're living here and you're here, you can catch COVID and you can pass it on. And that's why we're vaccinating everyone. I think all you have to do is present an ID to attest to your name and your age.
Why is there such a discrepancy in the amount of Moderna vaccine versus Pfizer that's available in our state? And Robin wants to know that.
It has to do with production, and Moderna vaccine is a relatively, the Moderna company is a relatively new company. Pfizer does have a lot of experience in producing vaccines. We're going to have a lot more different vaccines that are going to be available probably within the next several weeks. So the shortage of vaccine that we're experiencing now will be alleviated very soon. So that's going to be that's the good news. But we're going to be giving out the vaccine as quickly as we can get it, and we depend on the companies who make the vaccine and our state government to make sure that vaccine gets to us.
So I know that the CDC has these phasings, but I want to know when we're going to get to some certain groups. So we have another on YouTube that wants to know when we're going to get to the younger folk, those that are 60 to 69.
It's a good question again. In fact, we had the governor on site talking about vaccinations. Right now, we are really focused on what we call Group 1A, which is healthcare workers, so folks who need to be in the hospital because they care for people, and the folks who are 70 and older, those folks who we need to vaccinate to keep them out of the hospital because they're more likely to have illness. So we're focusing on that group of people, and once we get through those folks, we'll probably be moving into the remaining folks like the CDC recommends.
What about teachers? We need these students back in school ASAP. So when will we get to our teachers to make sure that they're safe?
I think teachers are in Group 1B,
That's right.
if I'm not mistaken, so they should be up next.
Yep, that's it.
You talked about, Dr. Oliverio, the shortage of doses that we're experiencing right now. What will we do if the hospital runs out?
Well, I mean, that's actually a situation where that shows, we're doing our job. Every dose that we have needs to be in somebody's arm. So our goal is to vaccinate as quickly as we get vaccine. We'll be working very closely with DHEC and South Carolina government to make sure that we get vaccine so that we can keep this effort going. My hope is we don't get into that spot, but if that happens, we may have to reschedule clinics until more vaccine comes in. But we will make sure that A, if it comes in, we get it in your arm, and B, we'll get you that second dose.
Ron wants to know if he can still receive the vaccine or if he could still donate plasma after receiving the vaccine.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
That is a
Told you
good
they were
question.
tough. Told you they were tough.
I would think the answer would be yes. We aim to vaccinate the entire or much of the U.S. population. I cannot envision a scenario where that many people would have to stop donating plasma. We don't really make that distinction for any other vaccine. I don't see why we'd do that for the COVID vaccine. So I would say the probable answer is yes.
What about children? When will they be vaccinated? What's the age cutoff for Pfizer or Moderna?
Well, the people who participated in the Pfizer study were 16 years and older, and in the Moderna trials were 18 years and older. So folks under that age have not been studied yet.
There are studies ongoing, so we should know more about that in the near future. But like Dr. Hepburn said, we don't have that information now.
Okay. Now, Tabitha and I heard that people are dying from the vaccine. Have you guys heard this? And how many people have died from this vaccine?
I don't know of any.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any.
I'm not aware of any. I mean, there have been some folks who've had some serious reactions, like would occur with any vaccine, but to my knowledge, there haven't been any deaths from the vaccine. There was a doctor that died in Brazil, but I think he had some other problems, and I don't think he died from the vaccine.
They may be referring to some of the reports. You'll see in Norway there was a small smattering of cases in very, very frail people who are in long-term care facilities who within, say, 7 to 10 days may have passed away after getting the vaccine. That's probably not a statistically significant event, and it happened in people who were either terminally ill or very, very old and infirm. So there are a lot of reports about things like clusters of cases or problems with the vaccine. By and large, you got to remember that, like Dr. Hepburn said, this is a remarkably safe vaccine, and maybe 11 out of a million people will have a serious reaction, and that's a lot fewer than die from COVID.
Is this vaccine safe for pregnant women or women that are breastfeeding? Asking for a friend.
Again, pregnant women were not included in the Pfizer and Moderna trials. However, people in the trials did get pregnant, and they are being followed. So we simply don't have any data on pregnant women currently. I can tell you that animal studies showed that there were no problems with the pregnant animals or their offspring. And I believe the American College of OBGYN is recommending that the vaccine not be withheld from pregnant women, and that also lactating women who are breastfeeding, also be offered the vaccine.
So Toby wants to know, when are those immunocompromised people, when are they going to be included in the phasing? People living with HIV, people with cancer, when are they coming up in the line?
I don't know if there are any studies that are specifically looking at that. What will happen is there will be retrospective analysis of studies, and we'll be able to better subgroup those patients who are in studies. And as we go forward, we'll know more about the groups who were originally studied. So we'll get information about subgroups as these studies go on. There's probably not going to be studies of specific populations like that head to head. Usually this is a retrospective analysis.
But they are included in that first phase, immunocompromised patients?
Yes.
Okay. I can't let this one go unnoticed because we've seen so much about it on the news. So this variant virus, is it resistant to the vaccine, or is the vaccine still applicable?
There is no indication thus far that any of the new variants, be it the UK variant or the South African variant, is resistant to the vaccine. So folks who've had the vaccine, as far as we know currently, do get protection against the new variants.
Do I have to be vaccinated in the state in which I live, or can I receive my vaccination from anywhere? Doreen wants to know.
Wherever you are.
Wherever I am. And what about the Coliseum? I know we're doing this drive-through clinic, and it's massive. It's a massive operation. Do I have to be a Robert St. Francis employee in order to go through this clinic?
No. We actually, Sherelle was instrumental in vaccinating our own people. We're now looking at the community, and that's a community effort. So folks who are 70 and older in the community can either schedule with their physician, or they can call 727-DOCS or use the email address to get that appointment.
All right, and we're wrapping up on time, so I'm going to ask one final question. What if I just get one dose? Am I still halfway all right?
I think it shows that you're about 50% protected after the first dose, but we do recommend that you get both doses, absolutely.
One of the things is, the FDA wasn't going to approve anything that was less than 50% efficacious. So the reason why they did 2 doses was because it was right on the edge. So, the studies show that 2 doses get you there. So get your 2 doses.
Now, the Johnson & Johnson product that's coming up will be 1 dose.
Yep.
So that should be coming out fairly soon, hopefully.
Yeah, next couple of weeks, hopefully.
So many more developments on the horizon. We're so excited about what we'll be able to offer you as a healthcare system, but we want you to continue asking these questions, because it's important that you feel informed and empowered. This was great. I learned so much, and the 30 minutes have flown by. But if you missed a question, or if you want more information, please go to our website. We'll have these questions updated soon enough. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you in that vaccination line.